Welcome to our discussion on the new Pentagon plan that's causing quite the stir. We're diving into a perspective that urges a shift in the US posture, focusing more on the mainland and withdrawing from directly antagonizing big players like China and Russia.
That's a bold move. It seems
Right.
like the idea is to de escalate tensions by not provoking these powers unnecessarily. Yes?
Exactly. And what's particularly interesting is that Kalza breaks it down quite vividly. He outlines that there's a new Pentagon assessment recommending this realignment of strategy. Essentially, instead of constantly pushing back at China and Russia, the focus should shift to core interests on the mainland.
Uh, that almost sounds like a pivot, doesn't it? Like, instead of playing the perpetual antagonist, the US might instead be concentrating on strengthening its own defensive and strategic positions at home.
Right. Yes, it's a significant departure from some of the earlier policies that were always about showing strength against adversaries. This assessment suggests that sometimes it's like stepping back might actually create more stability, or at least reduce the chances of an accidental escalation.
Interesting point there. But I'm curious, doesn't this new plan run the risk of being interpreted as weakness? I mean, isn't there a danger that a step back can be seen as appeasement?
That's a valid concern. However, the argument here is that by recalibrating the approach, the US could avoid needless confrontations that might spiral out of control. It's not about showing weakness, but about being strategic and measured.
Yep, and I think what's compelling is how the video frames this shift. It points out that the current international climate is increasingly multipolar, with China and Russia asserting more influence globally.
Yes, right. It's like we're living in a time where the US has to reconsider its global commitments, and sometimes that means not being drawn into every potential conflict. The idea is to improve strategic clarity and focus on areas that directly impact national security.
Focusing on the mainland could mean reallocating resources to address internal challenges, cybersecurity, infrastructure, and so on, while maintaining enough deterrence internationally.
Exactly. And what's also interesting is how this assessment, as outlined by Carl Za, highlights that the shift might create room for more cooperative dialogues with these nations rather than constant hostility.
Right. I see the argument, but let's challenge it a bit. Won't withdrawing from actively antagonizing China and Russia risk enabling them to push even harder for their own agendas if they sense a relaxation?
That's a sharp point. It does seem counterintuitive at first, but the idea is to rebalance rather than completely disengage. The nuance is in not being overly provocative while still upholding national interests.
So it's kind of like a tightrope walk, isn't it? Not stepping on toes, but also not giving free rein to aggressive actions from these powers.
Absolutely, it's like navigating between Scylla and Charybdis. The Pentagon assessment implies that by de escalating unnecessary tension, it could actually pave the way for more stable long term dynamics.
Yep. And there's an interesting psychological aspect too, right? Like, aggressive posturing has its own costs, both economically and politically.
Yeah, exactly. Constant antagonism can drain resources, breed mistrust, and complicate alliances. By stepping back, the US might prevent overextension and, keep its focus where it counts.
Right. Does the content mention any specific strategies for this shift? I mean, are they suggesting measures like diplomatic channels or solely strategic military repositioning?
The emphasis seems to be more on strategic repositioning. The Pentagon assessment calls for a refocus on domestic defense and a more measured approach in international arenas. It's like sort of about realigning priorities.
And I guess that brings us to the practical implications. How do you think this plays out on the global stage, especially with current events?
Well, in an era of increasing multipolarity, this recalibration can have ripple effects. It might encourage, say, more multilateral cooperation, or at least reduce direct conflicts. It's like when you take a friend out of the argument, and suddenly everyone takes a
Yes,
breath.
that's a neat analogy. By stepping back, the US could actually create more space for diplomatic engagement rather than brinkmanship. Though I still wonder if any critics think this amounts to a retreat.
Some certainly do raise that flag. There are voices that argue, hey, if you withdraw too much, you might lose leverage. But the counterpoint is that the dynamic isn't as binary, it's more about flexibility.
It's like having a flexible defense posture instead of a fixed one, right? That might even be more realistic given the current geopolitical shifts.
Right, flexibility is key. And this content also ties into broader trends about global power competition. With narratives shifting around Russia and China, our understanding of deterrence is evolving.
Yes. And don't forget that such strategic shifts can influence domestic policy as well. Adjusting posture could lead to debates in Congress about budget reallocations, modernization of defenses, and perhaps even changes in alliance structures.
Exactly. It has implications not just abroad, but right at home. And that's why the assessment, as presented by Carl Jah, is so fascinating. It forces us to think about the balance between national assertiveness and global diplomatic responsibility.
It also raises questions about long term global stability. Is it possible that by being less confrontational, the US can actually lead in creating a more balanced international order?
That's the hope, I think. By focusing on the mainland and reducing rebuttals to every provocation, the idea is to foster a climate where cooperation replaces conflict. It's a high stakes gamble.
Right. Yet, there's inherent uncertainty. After all, China and Russia might not react in the spirit of cooperation. There could be strategic miscalculations on all sides.
True, true. It's not a foolproof solution. There's always the risk of misunderstanding intentions. The content does suggest, though, that recalibrating might actually lead to reduced risks of accidental escalation.
And that plays into the narrative that sometimes less is more when it comes to managing international conflicts. It's like, sometimes turning down the volume can help everyone hear each other better.
Exactly, it's like dialing back on the tension. And while it requires robust internal strength to manage external challenges, it's ultimately about, setting realistic boundaries.
Yeah, yet there's a part of me that wonders, can a strategy so subtle really counter well-established adversarial tactics? Or do you think it's a bit idealistic?
I get that skepticism. It does seem idealistic when you put it like that. But sometimes forward thinking defense strategies require a leap of faith, trusting that less antagonism will actually yield more strategic
Right.
gains.
It's definitely a nuanced scenario, balancing on both military pragmatism and diplomatic artistry. I imagine there'll be a lot of debate among strategists about the merits and risks of this approach.
No doubt about that. Whether you view it as a clever recalibration or a potential retreat depends on your perspective on power and influence. But one thing's clear, it's stirring up a lot of discussion in both military and policy circles.
Yep, and that discussion is vital because understanding these shifts helps us grasp the evolving nature of global politics. It challenges old paradigms and encourages us to rethink traditional notions of deterrence and engagement.
Absolutely. It's about adapting to a more complex international environment where rigid posturing might not serve us well in the long run. The analysis by Carl Jah really pushes us to consider the idea that sometimes strategic restraint can be just as powerful as overt action.
I guess the takeaway is that the future of global strategy might be more about smart pivoting rather than brute force confrontation. It's a fascinating pivot in thought that could redefine how we engage on the world stage.
Exactly. And it leaves us with lots of questions about how this might reshape alliances and rivalries. It's a conversation that will likely evolve as every player, both at home and abroad, adjusts its stance.
Yep. Thanks for walking through these insights. It's an exciting time, and I'm eager to see how these strategic shifts unfold.
Absolutely. Stay tuned as these ideas develop. It's a reminder that in geopolitics, sometimes a shift in perspective can lead to entirely new possibilities.